This Penn Barstool ESPN deal is really fascinating to me. And I want to look into this. They're now, as I am speaking to you, the stock market has closed, and Penn is near a multi-year low as it pertains to its stock price. Penn stock price is now lower than it was 3 years ago, basically before they went out almost and bought Barstool in the first place. It was lower, obviously, during COVID when everything fell apart. But when they announced the Barstool deal, Penn stock was $37.80. That was right after they announced the Barstool deal. That was right around the Super Bowl that was played in Miami, right before everything shut down for COVID. $37.80 in February of 2020. As I speak to you today, Penn has now fallen to $23.50. Now, look, I think the decision to buy Barstool was a smart one by Penn. I think that was a rational choice. I think they got a great asset, but now they've basically given away that asset. They took an $850 million write-off. Their stock is $14 and $15 cheaper than it was after the Barstool deal was announced, and they're nearing a 3-year plus low. So if you bought Penn stock when they bought Barstool, you've lost 40% of your money just by sitting on it. Now, the stock price went way higher, and to be full disclosure, I bought Penn stock at a low price in March and April of 2020. I sold it years ago. I thought the stock market wildly overreacted to COVID, as you guys well know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I bought stock in everything. But here's what's going on. This is a desperate Hail Mary by ESPN and Penn. Penn, through Barstool, has ended up with, at most, around 5% of the overall gambling market. FanDuel is number 1. DraftKings is number 2. MGM is number 3. And Caesars is number 4. And then there's a big drop-off, and there are a bunch of different brands out there fighting for 5th place, basically. So the top 3, I think, have, and certainly the top 4, 90% of the sports gambling market. So Penn is now panicked because they thought they were going to have a more substantial share of the overall gambling market, and they're now throwing $1.5 billion up to $2 billion to ESPN in a desperate hope that ESPN Bet is somehow going to make them more relevant. Meanwhile, ESPN, as a part of Disney, is just collapsing. And I think what's going on here is ESPN is like 5 years behind the market. If they really wanted to get involved in sports gambling, they should have done a deal 5 years ago. Now I think much of the market share is already set. I think ESPN Bet is going to be a total bust. I think it's going to fail. And ESPN even thinks this, I believe, on some level, because they're continuing to take money from other sports gambling companies. If this was an exclusive deal and ESPN was saying, hey, we're not going to take $1 in advertising money from FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, Caesars on any of our programming, I would say, okay, I can see they're trying to make up for lost time. They're not even doing that. They are basically desperate to make money while they can because the business is collapsing. And so they're taking $1.5 billion guaranteed over the next 10 years. And by the way, that's not even very much money. I mean, I'm just being honest. $150 million a year is not that much. For a licensing deal to allow the ESPN name to be used. And let me just say this. If you're a big believer in Barstool, why in the world would you want to spend your money gambling with ESPN? They wouldn't air Barstool. They regularly, ESPN, have attacked Barstool branded products. Why in the world, if you're a huge Barstool person and you were loyal, which I respect, and you went and downloaded the app because you were loyal to the Barstool brand and to the talent that they have, why in the world would you now want to give your money to ESPN? I don't think that anybody's coming in. And if you're an ESPN viewer and you really want to gamble on sports, don't you probably, like me, where I live in Tennessee, have multiple different accounts and apps already on your phone to allow you to gamble if you are so desiring to do so? I think this is a desperate Hail Mary money grab from ESPN, and I think it's a desperate Hail Mary market share move by Penn because they're now writing off Barstool and giving it back to Portnoy for no money. I mean, credit to Dave. He sold the company, and now the company is coming back to him. He got all the money for selling the company, and now he gets the control of the company back. That's a great deal for him. I don't begrudge him on that move at all. I think it's fantastic. Good for him. I'm in favor of creative people making as much money as they possibly can. But my goodness, what a disaster of a deal for Penn. So you bought Barstool. You allowed the business to grow. You're now writing off an $850 million investment, which basically means you spent $850 million to get around 5% of the gambling market. And now you're going to spend another $1.5 billion and up to $2 billion to try to desperately raise your market share going forward? This is malpractice from a business perspective. Your strategy was, we're going to bet on Barstool. Okay, I get it. You run that business plan for 3 years, and then you abruptly decide, after spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy Barstool, that you're just going to write off Barstool, and now you're desperately going to get in bed with ESPN? This is like two ugly, drunk people, something I know about, late at the bar, ending up hooking up with each other because they both got no better options. This is embarrassing if you're looking at it from a Penn management perspective. Portnoy absolutely checkmated them, gets his business back, gets all of his money that you already paid to him, and he walks away with everything. Meanwhile, ESPN looks like a bunch of clowns because they're 5 years late to the party. ESPN has no brand loyalty. OutKick has better brand loyalty than ESPN. Nobody likes ESPN now. They watch it because it has the games. Barstool certainly has better brand loyalty than ESPN. If ESPN didn't have games, nobody would watch it. And now ESPN and Penn are desperate. And initially, the stock market, the price increased. But I said from the get-go, go back and look at my tweets as soon as this news broke that it made no sense. And now it feels like the stock market is circling back around. And they're like, wait a minute. This is a joke of a deal. This is a bad deal for Penn. Good deal for Portnoy, and I think for the Barstool talent. They're the winners here, but ESPN is a huge loser. Penn is the biggest loser of all. What an embarrassing management move they have made, and what an embarrassingly late move that Disney is making through ESPN. Remember, Bob Iger said we'll never be involved. This is just a desperate attempt to get more revenue on the books to help make the collapse of ESPN's business not look as bad. It's a pathetic, desperate move on both ends. That's my analysis of Penn, Barstool, and ESPN.